Tonight, unwelcome homecoming. Angry farmers confront the Premier over her government's green energy plans. Good evening and welcome to ABC News Victoria. I'm Iskhander Razak. Also tonight, hundreds of CFMEU officials out of work as the union is placed into administration. Kamala Harris accepts the Democratic presidential nomination, delivering her most important speech yet. And industrial action threatens the Hawks' crucial clash against the Kangaroos in Tasmania. The Victorian Premier has been mobbed by hundreds of protesters in her hometown after a speech at a regional press event. The demonstration comes after the government continues to defend its infrastructure spending spree. Here's state political reporter Elias Klur.
Amidst the mayhem is the Premier's getaway car. In a slow crawl away from hundreds of fed-up farmers.
People from right across regional Victoria, right now they are feeling ignored.
The protesters gathered in East Bendigo, the Premier Jacinta Allen's hometown and electorate. The protest was against government plans to build renewable energy projects on private farmland and their right to appeal it in courts.
Family farms are being destroyed by this reckless rollout of renewables.
The Premier was there to give a speech at a rural press gathering and was shepherded away from the farmers into the private event.
Firstly, it's important that people can have the opportunity to have their say. Secondly, in terms of the issue itself, I do respectfully disagree.
I feel sick in the guts because they're not consulting. They're just drawing lines on maps.
Politicians need to understand that these people here are the ones that are actually bringing the funds in to this country.
Some of the protesters expressed frustration over what they say is a lack of support for regional Victorians, called upon the government to halt major city-based projects like the suburban rail loop and reinvest some of that money back into the bush.
The Premier doesn't have the money to build it. Can't assure communities around Melbourne's growth corridors and regions that it will not mean that they are further neglected than they already are.
The Major Projects Minister today dismissed reports the $34 billion SRL mega project is losing support in the Cabinet.
I think all of my colleagues are really excited about this project for what it's going to deliver for Melbourne. I mean,
do you want it, Minister?
Well, not that I'm aware of.
From farmers to finances, the government has its work cut out. Elias Klur, ABC News, Melbourne.
US Vice President Kamala Harris has formally accepted her party's nomination to run for the nation's top job. An adoring crowd of supporters mostly applauded her keynote address, but divisions within the Democratic ranks still flickered through on the fourth and final day of the convention.
From supporting star to the lead role.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
An extraordinary moment for the daughter of immigrants, thanking her late mother for her self-belief.
She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it.
She emphasised her years as a prosecutor.
My entire career, I've only had one client, the people.
And she prosecuted the case against her Republican rival.
The consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
The war in Gaza remains a division point. Protests have continued throughout the week, with the party refusing to add a Palestinian-American speaker to the stage.
We feel that our party is betraying our values with this decision.
Harris defending the current policy, but striking a slightly different tone.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends.
She also promised progressive reforms like enshrining abortion and voting rights.
What about us?
This night had another star-studded lineup, the famous side-by-side with Harris's family.
And what our to teach you how to say your auntie's name.
Kamala!
Donald Trump held his own campaign event at the southern border, but was watching events in Chicago closely.
Why didn't she do the things that she's complaining about? She could have done it 3.5 years ago. She could do it tonight.
It's hard to exaggerate just how much Kamala Harris's ascent to the top of the party ticket has completely reshaped this race. The Vice President is still claiming the underdog tag, but within this room there is an overwhelming sense of optimism that they can win this race. The polls are tight, but they believe they have the momentum, and they believe America is ready to elect its first female president.
She's gonna just go all the way. They won't know what to do.
Democrats have embraced a common direction.
We are not going back.
Now Harris has 11 weeks to convince the country to come with her. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Chicago.
Back home, and the state's gambling watchdog has handed betting giant Tabcorp a record $4.6 million fine after an extensive investigation unearthed repeated misconduct. The findings from the Victorian Gambling and Casino Control Commission include a 2022 example of Tabcorp depositing $2,000, matched dollar for dollar, into a customer's account after they'd lost more than $100,000 and showed signs of problem gambling. Tabcorp conceded its behaviour fell short of expectations, but insists it's since taken steps to protect customers. The Commission ordered it to overhaul its harm reduction processes.
It is always a message to the rest of the industry that if we discover that you are hurting people and doing nothing about it, then we will fine you proportionately.
All branches of the CFMEU's construction division have been formally placed into administration over allegations of corruption and infiltration by organised crime. The union had resisted the appointment of an external administrator, but earlier this week, the federal parliament passed laws giving the government the power to step in. With an administrator now in place, hundreds of officials have had their roles terminated, most of them volunteer positions. But the National Secretary, Zack Smith, remains in his job. The federal government moved ahead of a possible court challenge to legislate it.
There's no place for corruption or intimidation in the building industry from unions. There's no place for corruption, and to have a corrupt union official, you need a corrupt employer to be paying their money, and there's no place for it.
Australia will for the first time take command of an international maritime effort to protect shipping routes in the Red Sea, but won't deploy any additional military assets. A month after the ABC first revealed the mission, the Albanese government's facing criticism for still not providing a warship. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
A glimpse of the Australian Army's future lethal hardware. High-tech South Korean-designed vehicles will soon be built at a new facility in the Defence Minister's own Victorian electorate. Richard Marles on hand for the opening of the military factory before officially confirming the ADF's next overseas mission.
An Australian will be taking command of the Combined Task Force 153. This is a very significant step.
From October, a Navy captain and a small number of other Australian personnel already stationed in the Middle East will take charge of an international maritime task force. CTF 153 is dedicated to protecting shipping routes in the Red Sea from Houthi rebel attacks. But as the ABC revealed last month, the new deployment won't include an Australian warship.
It should be more, and if we had a competent government in place, it would be more, because it's important to stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies.
We need to be focused on our region. I mean, that is in terms of the assets that we deploy.
It's not ideal for us to send a command team across but not to send a ship. However, we know that the Royal Australian Navy does not have enough surface combatants.
This week, the threats posed to international trade through the Red Sea highlighted by an attack on a Greek vessel. And the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier has now arrived in the Middle East amid concerns of a growing conflict.
We know that tensions are high. We want to see a de-escalation of tensions in the region.
Australia's command role in the Middle East will last just 6 months, and privately, American officials are disappointed that this country's still declining to send a warship to the region. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
An expert panel has called for tougher regulation of alcohol and gambling to help prevent violence against women. The review was sparked by an urgent National Cabinet meeting earlier this year after a spike in the number of women killed. Among the recommendations, the panels called for steps towards a total ban on gambling ads, something crossbenchers are pushing for in Canberra. And the panel has recommended curbing alcohol sales and delivery, plus more money for crisis accommodation. E-scooters could now be expanded across Melbourne. 3 inner-city Melbourne mayors are banding together to create a new e-scooter zone in the inner north. It comes after the Melbourne City Council voted to terminate contracts with e-scooter companies because of ongoing safety concerns.
These freewheeling mayors want e-scooter hire in their hoods. The mayors of Merribeck, Darebin and Moonee Valley are pushing for a zone across their councils where e-scooters and e-bikes would be available for hire.
It's a critical link between east and west where there's public transport gaps.
E-scooters provide a cheap and sustainable transport option for residents to get around wherever they need to go.
The move comes just over a week after City of Melbourne councillors voted to break contracts on a trial hire scheme 6 months early over safety concerns, with the Royal Melbourne Hospital reporting a massive increase in injuries since hire services began. If the Inner North Council's plan goes ahead, there would effectively be a no-go zone between the northern and southern suburbs for hired e-scooters, with Yarra and Port Phillip councils also running e-scooter trials.
It was unexpected for the City of Melbourne to ban e-scooters, but I believe there's huge value in creating an Inner North shared mobility zone, no matter what Melbourne does.
The state government says it's disappointed in the City of Melbourne ban and will work with local councils who choose to introduce e-scooters on how best to manage their operations.
For these councils themselves, ultimately it doesn't matter for them. What I would say, if you're going to get on an e-scooter, stick to the rules.
The Lord Mayor says his council won't be backing down.
On this issue, we respectfully disagree. The truth is the built form, the population density and the way people move around in the central city is different to those other areas.
You'll never stop poor behaviour completely, but we don't say that we're going to ban cars because of poor driver behaviour.
Driving a debate about the best way to get around town. Sasha Payne, ABC News, Melbourne.
The final round of the AFL home and away season kicks off tonight at the MCG, with 7 of the weekend's 9 matches set to make an impact on which 8 teams make the finals and in what position. But the threat of industrial action has also been causing headaches for teams and the AFL. For the details, reporters Adam Langenberg is in Launceston and Erin Masikaveteve at the MCG. Good evening to both of you. To you first, Adam, what can you tell us about this industrial action and how it's affecting Hawthorn's game against North Melbourne?
Yes, we're a couple of years away from a Tasmanian AFL team being in the league, but the state's already shaking things up. I'm here at Launceston's York Park, which is in the middle of an industrial dispute between Tas Networks and the Communications, Electrical and Plumbing Union. During the industrial dispute, there's a number of workplace bans in place, including a ban on turning the power back on. Because of that, there's been some lengthy delays in having outages resolved, and that led to a series of crisis meetings today between the AFL, Tas Networks and the state government. They've resolved to bring the time slot forward 4 hours from 4:40 at the twilight spot to 12:30 start tomorrow. And it's not the only game affected. Richmond's game versus the Gold Coast has been moved back an hour. It's now going to be at 3:20, so not all 3 Saturday afternoon games are on at once.
Erin, you're at the MCG where Collingwood have the slimmest of slim hopes of making the 8. How's it all shaping up?
Good evening, Isk. It is a very slim hope. They would have to win by well over 100 points and rely on other results to go their way as well. So really just playing for pride here tonight against Melbourne. Tomorrow, that Tigers game will be here at the MCG against the Gold Coast. And the Tigers have a chance to avoid the wooden spoon if they can win that game, and also if North Melbourne do lose to Hawthorn in that game in Launceston. Tomorrow night, Sydney have a chance to claim the minor premiership. They do sit one game clear at the top of the ladder, so a win against Adelaide at the SCG would mean that they do claim that prize. And then looking ahead to Sunday in 3 very big games of football, and the teams have just been confirmed a short time ago. So the Bulldogs in 6th place take on the Giants in 3rd. And good news for Bulldogs fans, Tim English, the ruckman, has been named. There was a bit of doubt around his ankle, but he is in the team. Following that game, Carlton in 8th place take on the Saints at Docklands. Charlie Curnow, we heard earlier today, has been ruled out already, but Adam Sard and Mitch McGovern have been named in the back line. And then in the final game of the home and away season, Fremantle hosting Port Adelaide in Perth. And Port welcome back their forward Mitch Georgiades, but Fremantle have everything to play for. They're in 9th place, and should the Dogs or the Hawks or the Blues drop their game, Fremantle could come home with a win and sneak into the top 8, so plenty still to play for.
A lot on the line for a number of teams. Adam Langenberg in Launceston and Erin Masikavetove at the MCG. Thank you so much to both of you. Protesters in Jakarta have forced the president into a major backflip with the biggest demonstrations Indonesia has seen for years. President Joko Widodo was trying to get around a court ruling that would have paved the way for his youngest son to run for a political seat. But the proposed changes to election laws sparked widespread calls of nepotism.
Late into the evening outside Indonesia's parliament, police and protesters were still sparring after a remarkable outpouring of anger across the country. Tens of thousands of protesters turned out in major cities, accusing the president and his allies of trying to rewrite election rules to favour his son.
We'll keep fighting and we'll get many more people to join us. This is only the beginning of how we fight against attacks on democracy in Indonesia.
President Joko Widodo last year managed to secure his oldest son a loophole to run for vice president, despite being below a minimum age limit. Now it appears he's trying again with a petition to allow his other son, 29-year-old Kaesang Pangarap, to run in regional elections. But the court this week ruled the minimum age rule of 30 must remain in place, prompting parliamentary allies of Mr Widodo to try to rewrite election rules and defy the court.
The mess will continue until Joko Widodo is out from Indonesian politics for good.
And with anger mounting, the president's allies announced they were cancelling their efforts to revise the laws.
After a decade as president and with just a few weeks to go, this really is a blow for Joko Widodo. Having secured the vice presidency for his oldest son, it appeared he was well on the way to creating a family dynasty to continue his influence after his term ends in October.
The backdown has largely calmed the mood in the Indonesian capital, at least for now. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Jakarta.
Experts are calling for a complete redesign of button batteries, following new research showing they're leading to serious injuries and child deaths worldwide. Advocates say recent product safety reforms don't go far enough and they want major manufacturers to take action.
The button batteries in Evie's hearing aids are a constant temptation.
No, we're not popping one out, darling. Can I have it? Can I have it, darling?
The 14-year-old, who has an intellectual disability, was recently hospitalised after putting one in her ear.
That was pretty scary, and it's happened again since then. By the time I saw it, there was sort of lots of black discharge.
A new study has looked into the cases of more than 400 children across the world who suffered button battery injuries.
Button batteries are dangerous because they form a current which releases hydroxide ions, and those hydroxide ions are extremely alkaline and corrosive.
The leading injury was a hole or damage to the esophagus. followed by burning through to the windpipe and aorta. 35 children died, including 3 in Australia.
It can make holes in the intestines, which can also be potentially fatal.
Injuries from inserting the batteries included a hole in the nose.
Worldwide, button battery injuries are rising. In Australia, about 20 kids a week end up in emergency departments. Advocates say recent reforms like child-proof packaging don't address the core issue. The products remain unsafe.
We started seeing kids ingesting button batteries in the late 70s, and the button battery companies have known about it since then.
There needs to be mandatory legislation that force manufacturers into changing button batteries.
Major manufacturer Energizer says it's introduced a bitter coating and blue dye and continues to research how to improve safety. Michael Atkin, ABC News.
Rescue crews are celebrating after freeing a whale that got tangled up in Sydney Harbour. In an operation spanning 20 hours, they were able to cut the young humpback loose, allowing it to resume its migration south.
This is the moment the young humpback was set free.
Yes, got it!
With specialists cutting off a rope and floats that were wrapped around the base of its tail.
This animal has been through a huge ordeal. Being entangled in fishing gear is an awful thing, but then having boats, drones, in the busiest harbour on Earth.
The 13-metre mammal was first spotted by a whale-watching cruise near Manly at lunchtime on Thursday.
This whale was one of many or thousands humpback whales just doing its normal thing, its migration.
It triggered a major marine operation that had to be paused while the sun was down.
So we attached a tracker to that whale in the hope that we'd be able to pick it up today to finish the job.
But the tracker became dislodged overnight when the whale was outside the harbour limits. Fortunately, it came back for help.
It stayed close. We were able to find it because if it went onto the humpback highway, it could have been like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Restarting the mission this morning, they made several attempts to approach it over more than 4 hours.
The challenge with that whale was the fact that it had so much energy, and it just took quite a long time for us to tire it out so that we could then get in and do that cut safely.
At the end of a dangerous and lengthy operation, these heroes celebrated on shore.
What we did today certainly gave that animal the best possible outcome, for its future.
Healthy and heading back out to sea, having survived to tell the tale. Xanthi Gregory, ABC News, Sydney.
To finance, the share market had a bit of a stumble while ANZ has been hit with a $250 million penalty by Australia's financial regulator. Here's David Chow.
Well, after rising for 10 days in a row, the All Ords finally fell today, but only by a tiny fraction. But it's done pretty well lately, having jumped 5% from its low point a few weeks ago. But overall, it's still down more than 1% from the record high it touched just before that huge sell-off at the start of the month. Meanwhile, today's worst performer was Ingham's, which played chicken and lost. Its share price plunged despite its profit jumping 68%, which, it seems, wasn't good enough. But Main Pharma shares surged despite its $169 million loss, which wasn't as bad as last year's. And ANZ did poorly after the financial regulator APRA ordered the bank to keep an extra $250 million in reserves. So that's money just sitting there doing almost nothing, which is a bank's worst nightmare. All this while another regulator, ASIC, investigates the bank for market manipulation in relation to its bond trading. Now, this is really hurting ANZ as it's fallen behind the other banks on a total returns basis, which tracks the increase in its share price and dividends. Now, overseas, Wall Street fell quite a bit, but it was a mixed bag for Asian markets. Oil prices rose sharply, while gold, iron ore and copper fell. And the Aussie dollar is buying 67.2 US cents. And finally, Tesla is no longer the top-selling EV brand in Europe. That honour now goes to BMW. And it just so happens the Tesla brand is turning toxic, according to consumer surveys, which could be a CEO problem. And that's finance.
There could be 3 Australians in Formula One next year, following the promotion of Jack Doohan to the drive for Alpine. The 21-year-old has been a development driver for Alpine this season and will replace Esteban Ocon in F1 after he joined the Haas team. Jack Doohan is the son of Mick Doohan, who won 5 consecutive motorbike world titles between 1994 and 1998. The other Australians currently on the F1 grid are Oscar Piastri and Daniel Ricciardo. Australian cyclist Ben O'Connor has taken a commanding lead in Spain's La Vuelta after powering to victory on stage 6. He dominated the 185-kilometre section, breaking away on the penultimate climb to seize the race leader's red jersey from 3-time champion Primož Roglič. The 28-year-old from Perth now leads by almost 5 minutes in the general classification. The victory has also seen him join the prestigious list of riders with stage wins on all 3 of cycling's grand tours.
I just laid it all out there, and I felt like I could win this stage from the start. So, yeah, it's pretty special when you can just go out and crush it like that. I absolutely loved every moment.
As the afterglow of the Paris Olympics fades, many of Australia's leading athletes are facing the harsh realities of the aftermath. Australia's most successful games in history yielded 18 gold medals, but the athletes are now dealing with financial, emotional and mental challenges.
Matt Wern was the first man to defend a dinghy-class gold medal in Paris. It earned him the honour of carrying the Australian flag at the closing ceremony, but the spotlight is already fading.
Once all the media and everything dies down, we'll just sort of be going back to, your sailor that sails out of Perth, and there won't be much involved and it becomes hard to find sponsors.
Pride, and I'm so proud of myself, I'm so proud of us, but I'm so disappointed. And I feel so embarrassed.
Georgie Parker was part of the Hockeyroos team that was knocked out in the quarterfinals in Rio 2016.
It's a really sad time, and you're embarrassed and you're anxious and you're sad and you're angry and you're feeling all these emotions that you feel that you're not allowed to give.
Parker's now in the process of having her Olympic rings tattoo removed.
Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of something that I didn't achieve.
She says it's important to remember not every athlete has a picture-perfect Olympics.
So I think it's that sudden shift of being 100 miles an hour to suddenly no one caring about you again is what's the hardest bit.
In my head, I'm like, I gave it everything I have and it still wasn't enough. But what is enough? I guess that's the thing that I'm trying to come to terms with now.
For some, the answer may have to wait another 4 years. Amanda Shalala, ABC News.
To the weather. Overnight, there were isolated showers in the northeast of the state. Minimum temperatures were slightly above average, ranging from 3 to 8. The lowest was 0 at Mount Hotham. It was a mostly cloudy day, with cloud increasing from the west as a front approached the state. Light showers fell over western districts from late morning and into the afternoon. It hit 27 degrees in Mildura today. Melbourne hit a high of 18.9 degrees just before noon. Interstate today, it was mostly sunny in Sydney and Darwin, wet in Hobart and Perth, partly cloudy in Adelaide and Brisbane. The satellite image is showing cloud over Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, northern Tasmania and the southwest half of WA. A trough and warm front will cross Victoria this evening and early tomorrow morning. A weak ridge of high pressure will extend over northeastern Victoria tomorrow before a cold front crosses the state on Sunday. Gusty showers for Victoria, SA South, Tasmania, New South Wales and showers over Queensland's northern coast. Southwest WA will have showers and storms. For the capital cities, morning showers, then sunny for Sydney, showers easing in Hobart, sunny in Adelaide and Brisbane, windy with showers in Perth, partly cloudy in Darwin. Back home, partly cloudy with very isolated showers during the day. A mild to warm day with above average temperatures, light to moderate north to northwesterly winds. Cloudy with scattered light showers and patchy rain in the east, which will clear during the morning. The chance of an early morning thunderstorm in the far northeast. Fresh to strong and gusty winds in the morning in the hilly areas. On the bays, northerly winds reaching up to 30 knots early in the morning, then turning northwesterly 10 to 15 knots. Waves to 2 metres, decreasing to 1 metre during the morning. A strong wind warning is forecast for Port Phillip, Western Port, West Coast, Central Coast and Central Gippsland Coast. And a severe weather warning has also been issued for damaging winds for central parts of the state as Central North and the northeast forecast districts, as well as southwest and west, east and south Gippsland. For Melbourne, possible morning showers, then a mostly sunny day with a top of 21 degrees and a mild low of 14 degrees tonight. Pardon me for waiting for there, but you can see tomorrow's Melbourne weather. Looking ahead, Sunday showers and a possible thunderstorm, 22. Showers all through the week going into next weekend, so that dash of spring is not quite here yet. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. Good night.